Did Donald Trump just make the worst vice president selection in American history? Donald Trump's pick, Ohio's junior senator JD Vance, a former venture capitalist from San Francisco who worked for Peter Thiel. Here's what JD Vance previously said about Donald Trump. Trump is someone who doesn't offer solutions. He makes people I care about afraid. I might vote for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. Donald Trump is leading the white working class to a very dark place. Donald Trump is a terrible candidate. I'm a never Trumper. I don't think Donald Trump cares about any folks. I never liked Donald Trump. Trump is a demagogue. He's noxious. I can't stomach Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a reprehensible man. Donald Trump is a moral disaster. Donald Trump is a cynical asshole. Donald Trump is America's Hitler. These are statements that were made by Donald Trump's VP pick right now. So what changed? Well, when JD Vance was running for the Senate seat in Ohio, he quite literally had to kiss Donald Trump's ass. Donald Trump showed up in Ohio during the 2022 elections, mocked JD Vance for kissing his ass, didn't even say JD Vance's names right at some of these rallies. And then JD Vance did a complete 180 on his entire persona. He changed every aspect of his life and who he was. And then he came out and said that the biggest issue in 2024 is actually finding the truth of what really happened on J6th, and that's what he wants Donald Trump to focus on. JD Vance said that Mike Pence was actually not threatened, and he thinks that it was exaggerated, the threats to Mike Pence on January 6th. He came out against the Marriage Equality Act. He voted against IVF. He's been one of the most pro-Putin members in all of Congress in the United States Senate, perhaps other than Tuberville. You have JD Vance backing all of kind of Putin's agenda, and JD Vance says he doesn't care about Ukraine, supports nationwide abortion bans. We can go on and on and on through the list, but most significantly, he says the most important thing for a Republican in 2024 is to be full MAGA and to do whatever Donald Trump tells you to do. So on paper, he's probably the worst pick. He doesn't really add any states. He doesn't really touch upon any of Donald Trump's weaknesses, but he's somebody Donald Trump can control. We'll talk about this, what I think, hear what my brothers have to say is the worst VP pick, perhaps in American history. We'll also talk about Judge Eileen Cannon, the corrupt judge from the Southern District of Florida, appointed by Donald Trump. Trump lost in the 2020 election, which Donald Trump claims to this day that he didn't lose in 2020, despite losing by millions of votes and really just getting destroyed in the Electoral College. Well, Judge Eileen Cannon dismissed the Mar-a-Lago document case, saying that based on the appointment clause in the Constitution, that Special Counsel Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed and the funds to Special Counsel Jack Smith were unlawfully apportioned. This is an argument that has been already addressed by the United States Supreme Court decades ago. This is an issue that has been fully resolved. Special counsels have been used over and over again in Republican and Democratic administrations. I mean, just think, there was a special counsel used in the prosecution of Hunter Biden, for example, recently. But Judge Cannon says she's just confining her order to Donald Trump. So special counsels, only unlawful in her mind when it comes to Donald Trump, and she dismissed the case. And while, of course, that's not a good headline or it's a horrific decision, will finally allow Jack Smith to appeal to the 11th Circuit. I have no doubt he's going to ask for Judge Cannon to be removed from the case. Ultimately, I think the 11th Circuit not only will overturn what Judge Cannon did today, I think they're going to remove her from the case. You'll recall some of our earlier reporting, which first broke from the New York Times, that the supervising judge in the Southern District of Florida, basically Judge Cannon's boss, although she doesn't have the ability to fire Judge Cannon because federal appointments are for lifetime, she requested that Judge Cannon recuse herself, and that presiding judge was a George W. Bush appointee, a real conservative judge. Everybody's embarrassed by Judge Cannon in the Southern District of Florida. I think the 11th Circuit, which overturned her twice in another case involving Donald Trump in 2022, they're anxious, I think, to get this appeal from Jack Smith, and Jack Smith already put out a statement that he's going to be appealing. I want to, of course, also talk about the shooting that took place at the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. More details are emerging about the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, a 20-year-old white male, registered Republican. People who knew him said he was conservative. Some of the additional information we're getting that was reported from local Pittsburgh news is that his family had MAGA flags and Trump signs at the home where Thomas Matthew Crooks lived. He was wearing Second Amendment paraphernalia of a gun club that Don Jr. had been photographed around as well. And again, it's still unclear why someone, a registered Republican whose family seems to be Trump supporters, and someone who's described as identifying with kind of those types of views would engage in this act. I just think it's important to say violence in all forms needs to be condemned. Political violence has no place in our democracy, and we here at the MeidasTouch Network want to make it very clear political violence has no place in our system at all. I think I also want to make it clear that we're not going to gaslight our audience. What we've been doing here at the network is pushing back against statements that are threats to democracy. Doing that is not ratcheting up the rhetoric. It's calling out rhetoric. You can't both sides it. Well, I guess you can if you're the corporate media. Look, you have Donald Trump, who's been saying quite frequently that he wants to be a dictator. I want to be a dictator. I'm going to be a dictator for one day. I want to be a dictator on day one. That's not something you joke about. For those who go, oh, he didn't really mean it, or he just says he's going to be a dictator for one day. How do you normalize that? There's never been a time in American history where someone has run on the platform of being a dictator for a day or making jokes about dictatorships. Okay, Donald Trump has also said that the January 6th insurrectionists are hostages, and he says, release the hostages, Joe. Donald Trump's replaced the national anthem with a song by the J6th Choir, some of the most violent insurrectionists. Donald Trump has reposted QAnon stuff over 2,000 times. That's an actual death cult that spreads the most deranged conspiracies, including that when Donald Trump takes over as a dictator, he will engage in public executions of his political opponents on Capitol Hill. And that's what they say when they go, the storm is coming. That's what that means. Donald Trump posts that over and over again. When Nancy Pelosi's husband was the victim of an attempted murder, Donald Trump's immediate post that day was a QAnon post where we go one, we go all was his response. And then throughout his campaign, he's mocked the assassination attempt on Nancy Pelosi's husband and has spread a unhinged conspiracy that and a disproven conspiracy that Nancy Pelosi's husband was involved in a secret homosexual relationship with the person who tried to kill him. And then Donald Trump mocks it and then mock Nancy Pelosi and would laugh at it. Donald Trump would also, post a video of President Biden being like gagged and hogtied on the back of a pickup truck. And then the corporate media and Donald Trump would say, oh, well, it was just a video. It was just a repost. And it wasn't saying anything. I was just reposting the video. And even at the Republican National Convention, they're giving away AR-15s for free in raffles. And they're constantly chanting, fight fight, fight, over and over again. And after the shooting, Donald Trump looked at the crowd, he made a hand gesture, and he said, fight, fight, fight. Now, for a moment, Donald Trump was playing the media, which he says, look, now I'm a changed person. I'm focused on unity. And what does the corporate media do right away? Well, this is great for Trump. This is bad for Biden. Those are all of the takes that come out right away. Today, Donald Trump made posts further defaming his sexual assault victim. Did a post defaming E. Jean Carroll today and saying January 6th was a hoax. And he says, we need to have unity, though, and stop the hoax and stop E. Jean Carroll. For Donald Trump, it's always about him. He's not referring to national unity. When President Biden gave an important speech this weekend, President Biden was speaking to the American people about unity, coming together, not living in our disinformation silos, just getting out and talking to each other and being Americans first. When Donald Trump uses unity, he's talking about himself, and he's talking about no accountability. And he's picked a vice president in JD Vance as someone who will do whatever he says. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how the corporate media has been reporting on it. And I do want to say this, although perhaps it's slightly self-serving. I'm very proud of all of our correspondents here at the MeidasTouch Network for their coverage post-debate when there was the media narratives there. And I also want to applaud the coverage as well by all of our correspondents about the truthful reporting that they've done following the shooting, where they've denounced in the strongest terms possible all forms of political violence, but that they've been fearless in their reporting to not turn it into this political narrative of why this is bad for Biden, because that's the instinct of the media all the time, and great for Trump, versus here's what's happening, here's the data. The individual was a registered Republican wearing Second Amendment power. Here's what we know about what happened. And then you have the MAGA Republican members of Congress saying, Joe Biden ordered it. This is a leftist thing, which again is 100% false. Brett and Jordy, I want to welcome you to your show.
It's good to get the word in.
There's a lot going on. I know that was quite the long intro there, but I wanted to share at the top those thoughts.
Yeah, it was a rough weekend, and I just want to send just all my thoughts also to everybody out there in the Meidas Mighty, because I think it's just kind of traumatic for everybody to see stuff like that and to see images like that, and to just the onslaught that we have day after day of everything in our political system. Quite frankly, it's tough. I know, like, I was absolutely drained, all weekend, from the images that I saw and from the discussion online. And quite frankly, I felt that way since, the debate and before. It could be exhausting. And so I want to give a huge shout out to everybody for hanging in there. Now, I think back to some of the words that I said on this show, man, a good amount of times over the past few months, which is like, the election hasn't really started yet. Like when I was talking back then, like, if you remember, there are going to be unexpected events that happen along the way, things that we cannot even predict or fathom at this point. And that could be in any direction whatsoever. And I think now in these past few weeks, we have seen at least a few of those moments that we could not have expected. And it's been quite insane. And I don't think that it's going to let up anytime soon. I think we're going to continue to see, a lot of stuff develop as we get closer to the election. Tensions are going to rise. But I appreciate having this, pro-democracy community that focuses on honesty, that focuses on the truth. And, huge shout out to our team as well, because we were working, into the late nights all weekend to bring you all this coverage and doing all of our research, everything. And yeah, definitely have a lot to talk about this episode, but I'll first turn it over to Jordy to check in with you. How you doing, man?
Excited to get to tonight's show. I'm just going to dive in here and just say, like, how frustrated I know I am and the Midas Mighty, I know y'all are too from our interactions, just with, corporate media in general. It's like, look, while I appreciate the overall sentiment, absolutely, about everyone needing to take down the temperature, like I still think you need to live in reality about where the heat has been coming from and not gaslight everybody. But what I've seen from corporate media these last few days has been downright pathetic. Like trying to equate legitimate concerns about a second Trump presidency, Project 2025, and people rightfully calling it out to the violent rhetoric from MAGA Republicans and MAGA politicians. Like, let's be clear. I unequivocally, like Ben said at the upfront, we denounce any form of political violence. Like that is not the way. It will never be the way. But now the violence that we've seen, especially over these last 8 years, has consistently come from one party, the Republican Party. Like the shooter from over the weekend, he was not a Democrat. He was not an illegal immigrant. He wasn't an LGBTQ plus person. He wasn't an African American. He was a young white male, a registered Republican who appeared to be this big Second Amendment aficionado. So like this is a Republican on Republican crime where one Republican took a shot at another Republican with a gun that only Republicans think should be that accessible. The facts can't be understated. Don't gaslight me and tell me that it seems like the Democrats are involved in this corporate media. It's just so frustrating.
It really has been so incredibly frustrating to watch. And, there's this notion of, we need to turn down the temperature in our politics. And it's something that President Biden focused on in his address to the nation from the Oval Office. And it's something that I very much agree with. I think one of the roadblocks you hit, however, in that call to turn the temperature down is that Democrats can't do much to turn the temperature down because they're not the ones who turned it up. The Republicans are the ones who turned the temperature up. And it's hard to turn the temperature down when the opposition is literally like a furnace that is just radiating heat nonstop and at every moment. And yesterday, over the weekend, by the way, was kind of another representation of that, right? When you saw the responses to the shooting and the aftermath of it and the messages that folks were sending, when you saw people like Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, send words of support to Donald Trump, when you saw President Biden, when you saw everybody across the Democratic Party in terms of politicians, leadership, sending their thoughts, their prayers towards Donald Trump. And then you turned your head and you looked at what is MAGA saying right now? And MAGA was saying some of the most despicable things that I have seen, ratcheting up the temperature, almost stoking more violence. And I look for this post, for example, from Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is something that she posted right after the incident, which is so irresponsible. She wrote, "We are in a battle between good and evil. The Democrats are the party of pedophiles, murdering the innocent unborn, violence and bloody, meaningless, endless wars. They want to lock up their political opponents and terrorize innocent Americans who would tell the truth about it. The Democrat Party is flat out evil, and yesterday they tried to murder President Trump." How dare you? How dare you say something like that? Not only is everything in that false, everything in that is designed to create more violence. And one of the patterns that we have seen in so many, most, if not all, of these kinds of shootings, and oftentimes the ones same kind of patterns that we see at schools, are these are disturbed people who have been radicalized online by right-wing movements. Now, we don't know all the details about this person, so I want to be clear about that up front. But we do know that his classmates say that he was definitely conservative. That's what his classmates say. We do know that he was a registered Republican. We do know that his neighbors say that he had Trump signs in front of his house, signs plural, and had them there for, quote, quite a while until very recently. So they're still getting to the bottom of this, but it's very possible that this individual, like many of the school shooters we've seen, movie theater shooters, go on, that this is a right-wing violence that is caused by this sort of mass psychosis that we are seeing, stoked by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene using that exact rhetoric. And I saw Eric Trump even today. We know now that this person was a conservative. We know now that they tried to get into their gun club, that they were gun aficionados, that they were used an AR-15. We know all this stuff about this individual. Eric Trump today goes on Fox, and Eric Trump says they tried to kill the president. They tried to kill my father. That's what Eric Trump said. They his implication with they is that this is some sort of democratic person who tried to kill Donald Trump, when it ended up being somebody who at least lived in a house who was quite sympathetic to Trump, so sympathetic that they had pro-Trump signs out front of the house. So that kind of rhetoric is absolutely disgusting. And I think we'll talk about all of this as you speak to Cannon, as we speak about Judge Cannon, and we speak about this, we speak about all the issues on the show. But the thing that I have noticed constantly is the Republicans want one set of rules for themselves and one set of rules for Democrats and for everybody else. They want Donald Trump to have immunity, but President Biden doesn't get immunity. The Supreme Court's going to have to decide if the things President Biden does is immune or not, right? They want Donald Trump to be able to speak in his violent rhetoric. No one, perhaps in the history of our country, has pushed more violent rhetoric than Donald Trump, has ratcheted up the temperature more than Donald Trump, has destroyed our political system and destroyed the very fabric and culture of our country more than Donald Trump. Nobody. And they're absolutely fine with all of those statements. And the second that you try to put your record up against Donald Trump, fight for your policies, fight for your character, compare your character to Donald Trump, now they're trying to use it to gaslight you and say, whoa, you can't stoke that violence. You're stoking violence. No, that's not what's happening. But the media, the corporate media, they buy into this Republican framing. I already saw a clip, by the way, from the Lester Holt interview that's airing in a little bit on NBC. And one of the first question that they showed was them blaming Biden for an increase of violence and asking how Biden's words impact the violence in the United States of America. That's your takeaway from all this? Like, seriously, corporate media? Is that what we're doing right now? It is just so irresponsible across the board. And I'm growing so frustrated by it day by day, by the corporate media's failure to meet the moment. But if they're not going to meet the moment, we'll meet the moment here, Ben, right?
Well, take a look. This is what Donald Trump said in the aftermath of Nancy Pelosi's husband being the victim of an attempted murder. And other than what you've seen here on the MeidasTouch network, there was basically zero coverage of this, of what Donald Trump said, which in and of itself should be disqualifying, but then again, being found liable for sexual assault, bragging on audio tape about sexually assaulting women, bragging about inspecting girls at beauty pageants you own without their consent and inspecting naked bodies. That should be disqualifying. All of Donald Trump's name on Jeffrey Epstein's list and hanging out with him, Epstein flying on your plane, you flying on Epstein's plane, saying Epstein is a great guy. That should be disqualifying. But the media never talks about those things. But should President Biden ever say anything at all in his defense of democracy, that is 5 editorials in the New York Times in one day, 55 stories in the same day. I don't even think when Donald Trump was found liable for sexual assault, or when Donald Trump, was found liable for other horrific conduct, it even made like the front page of many newspapers. But just take a look at what Donald Trump wrote about Nancy Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi's husband. He goes, "I purposefully didn't comment on Nancy Pelosi's very weird story concerning her husband. But now I can, because she said something about me with glee that was really quite vicious. I saw a scared puppy," she said, "as she watched me on television like millions of others that didn't see that. I wasn't scared. Nevertheless, how mean a thing to say. She is a wicked witch whose husband's journey from hell starts and finishes with her. She is a sick and demented psycho who will someday live in hell." That's what Donald Trump said after Nancy Pelosi's husband was the victim of an attempted murder. You don't hear any corporate media talking about that at all. When Donald Trump reposts President Biden being hogtied and gagged, every day when Donald Trump posts QAnon memes, nothing, silence. You could hear a pin drop right in the lead up to this fascism that the corporate media seems to want.
You know what bothers me the most about it, Ben? I'll just add before I know you're working up to something, but that we know they have the ability to. That we've seen in the past couple weeks When they want to focus on something and they want to make it the story, they will make it the story. We've seen that since the debate. Have you ever seen? Like it's one of the things about this news cycle, this 24-hour news cycle that we've seen in the past few years, is that it's very hard to get a story to stick. Anything, no matter how big the story is, it's hard to get a story to stick. Because why? Because there's so much happening all the times. Yet the media found a way to stay laser focused on their efforts to try to take down Biden, right? But where was that laser focus with Project 2025? Yeah, people complain enough, they'll do like a segment about it. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, people will say, look, they covered it this once on Nicole Wallace. They'll cover it. I get it. They'll cover it. But the proportionality of the coverage, you see how when they want to turn on that spigot, when they really want to emphasize something, they go all out. Hundreds of articles a week on something. Every reporter smiling, waiting, tweeting. Like it's like a whole coordinated effort that you see out there. And that's the thing that really bothers me, because they are able to do it and they do not.
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about more about the selection of JD Vance as Donald Trump's vice president pick. Was that the worst selection in history? Was it worse than when McCain picked Sarah Palin? At least Sarah Palin didn't say that like McCain is America's Hitler. We'll talk about that and more. Let's take our first quick ad break of the show. A stretch fabric provides. Most clothes are uncomfortable or too tight or never actually the size you really are, not to mention the annoyance of trying to put a good outfit together. Everyone wants to dress their best and look good at all times because, frankly, it's a confidence booster. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. Rhone's comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident again without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. And with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I absolutely love Rhone. It's comfortable yet professional and has truly become my favorite clothing. We're on the move a lot, whether it's jumping from meeting to meeting or catching a flight or doing a hot take, whatever. Rhone commuter collection has never let me down. The versatility and overall comfort of the collection is undefeated. Even after I wear it all day, I still feel super fresh because of that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/Meidas and use that promo code Meidas to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/MEIDAS and use that code Meidas. It's time to find your corner office comfort.
Living in a city, I recently learned that indoor air pollution can be up to 5 times higher than outside. This was a real eye-opener for me. Then I discovered NeoPX, a 100% nature-based, bioengineered air purifier designed by PhD scientists. As someone who prioritizes health through diet and exercise, I realized that I needed to care about the air that I breathe daily too. NeoPX tackles harmful air pollutants called VOCs, which come from everyday items like furniture and cleaning products. The secret lies in pollutant-eating bacteria powered by Power Drops. Just mix the formula with water and add it to your plant monthly to activate air purification. NeoPX purifies the air as effectively as 30 regular houseplants. Plus, it's eco-friendly, requiring no electricity, and coming with a self-watering, biodegradable planter. The benefits are noticeable. 87% of customers feel a difference within a week. NeoPX lets you fight air pollution with nature. When you purchase NeoPX, you get 6 Power Drop pouches, and to celebrate the launch, NeoPlants is offering a 7th pouch free. That's an extra month of pure air. Go to neoplants.com/Meidas and the discount will be applied automatically at checkout. Shipping is available within the US with worldwide shipping coming soon. Breathe better, live better with NeoPX.
Let's go, y'all. Shout out to our sponsors, man. Ben, you're on mute, but I just want to say, shout out to Roan. Roan's been a partner of ours for a while. The links are in the description in the podcast. I wear Roan all the time. I check out that commuter collection all the time. And look, for y'all who might doubt me, I got my NeoPX right here. I'm team asthma. It's really helped me and my asthma. So definitely check it out.
Never doubt you, Jordy. No one has ever doubted. No one will ever doubt you.
I want to talk about Judge Cannon's ruling dismissing the Mar-a-Lago document case today. The first I want to show you, though, is a law professor at NYU. His name is Professor Rosenblum. Following the dismissal of the Mar-a-Lago document case, let me just show you what it is that Professor Rosenblum, again, NYU is like the top third or fourth law school in the country. So I just want to give you that background right there. He goes, this is what the professor says, I have been suspicious of the Judge Cannon is undermining the rule of law to protect Donald Trump line of argument, mostly because of the extreme rhetoric. I hadn't been following the case closely, though. Now I feel very naive. This is bonkers. She's just making things up. So I think about a professor at one of the top law schools in America saying that he thought the criticisms of her, that it was extreme rhetoric. When we would say that and I'm not saying he's talking about us, but I think we were at the forefront of calling out Judge Cannon's corruption, saying what Judge Cannon was going to do, making it clear that she was a political hack and not following the law. We weren't saying that because we wanted to use hyperbolic rhetoric to get clicks. Quite the contrary, it was just what we were observing, and it goes back to this kind of both sidesism, that calling someone out for their unlawful conduct is being equated with just another side of an argument to the unlawful conduct. Here were some of the comments, though, in response to what Noah Rosenblum said. Like one commenter was, the funniest thing to happen over the last couple of years is law professors struggling to grasp what so many of us already know. The law isn't real and judges are political actors. And I would just say specifically as it relates to these MAGA Republican judges who have destroyed decades and centuries of precedent. Or someone writes, I ask this with all sincerity and kindness. Do professors at these prestigious universities pay attention to a single thing outside the strict confines of their classrooms' lesson plans? Someone else wrote, welcome to our world. Sometimes the boy cries wolf because there's actually a wolf in his presence. And one of the things that corporate media always wants to do, and MAGA is good at doing, is making you think that everyone's crying wolf when it comes to Project 2025 and things like that. When it's like, I know nothing about it. I don't know. Oh, yeah. All my senior advisors are the authors of this thing. Oh, I'm not responsible for this at all. Oh, the Heritage Foundation is the main sponsor of the RNC. The guy who runs the Heritage Foundation, when JD Vance was announced, said, we're so back. We're in this right now, because JD Vance is one of the biggest proponents of Project 2025, where Donald Trump's political action committees and his top staff are cutting ads for Project 2025. But Donald Trump says, I have nothing to do with it. And so the corporate media goes along with those narratives. And if you say that he's attached to it, oh, you're just crying wolf. Well, that's until a authoritarian regime takes over and they start imposing that, which they say they are, and they're going to impose that on day one. I take these issues this isn't an academic exercise for us here at the MeidasTouch Network, or for you watching, for we the people, for our family, friends, colleagues, neighbors, country, and world. This isn't an academic exercise. When a leader of a major political party, in this case, the Republican Party, goes full MAGA, and their leader says, I want to be a dictator for one day, I take that as a threat. When that person says, release the hostages, Joe, regarding January 6th insurrectionists, and calls the insurrectionists hostages, I take that seriously. When the rhetoric of the leader of the MAGA Republican Party starts looking awfully similar to the rhetoric of Hitler, I take that seriously. And it's not, I'm not trying to make this comparison because, I'm trying to scare people. It's because the words are almost identical and the phrasing of things is a very strange way to phrase things that was like uniquely Hitler-esque. It was saying poisoning the immigrants or poisoning the blood of our people. Who uses language like that to describe a country built with immigrants? The immigrants are poisoning the blood. I'm going to carry out the biggest deportation in the history of the country or in the history of the world on day one. I take that very seriously. So on day one, they're going to send the police to start rounding up people who don't look like Donald Trump and JD Vance. That's what they're going to do. Start knocking on doors. That's what they say they're going to do. So to Professor Rosenblum and his ilk, that's not, calling it out is not the extreme rhetoric. The extreme rhetoric has been what Judge Eileen Cannon has been writing in her orders that we've been calling out, and you've bought into this paradigm of both sidesisms. We've been saying that she's corrupt and she's going to do these things. Now, I have a copy of her order, and she says, Trump's motion to dismiss the indictment based on the unlawful appointment and funding of special counsel Jack Smith is granted in accordance with this order. The superseding indictment is dismissed, she says, because special counsel Jack Smith's appointment violates the Appointments Clause of the United States Constitution. Special counsel Smith's use of a permanent indefinite appropriations also violates the Appropriations Clause. But the court need not address the proper remedy for that funding violation given the dismissal on Appointments Clause grounds. The effect of this order is confined to this proceeding. In other words, as it relates to Trump, special counsels, unlawful. I'm not going to speak to special counsels more broadly. Special counsels have been used throughout American history. The most obvious and basic example, too, is there's a special counsel that's prosecuting Hunter Biden that secured a guilty verdict against Hunter Biden. So special counsel's okay when it's Hunter Biden. Special counsel's okay when it's John Durham, appointed by Bill Barr to go after Donald Trump's political enemies. Overtly political, that was the instruction. Go find something. And John Durham lost both of his trials before juries. How about that? The judge didn't dismiss these cases without letting him go to jury verdicts. John Durham, who was a special counsel appointed by Bill Barr specifically to go after Donald Trump's enemies, a judge didn't throw the case. I went to juries. And the jury, in a speedy trial, ruled against Durham because Durham didn't have the goods and didn't have the evidence. So you have the absolute immunity ruling from last week saying that Donald Trump has the powers of a monarch and a king by the Supreme Court. Then there was a concurrence in that opinion by Justice Clarence Thomas, who didn't even answer the question before him about absolute immunity. He just wrote an additional concurrence, basically giving a roadmap for Judge Cannon to dismiss the case. And Clarence Thomas basically said, I got your back, Judge Cannon. Special counsels are improper and they're unlawful. And then Judge Cannon invited into her courtroom amici, people who file amicus briefs, to make arguments. Far right-wing groups went into her courtroom and participated as though they were parties, as though it's like an open house in her courtroom. And they gave her the argument that she basically copy and pasted verbatim and dismissed the Mar-a-Lago document case on the most specious of grounds. against Donald Trump. She dismissed the case of, and let's be clear what this case was about. Donald Trump stealing nuclear secrets. He stole nuclear codes. He stole war plans. And we know that he shared them with people who were like members at Mar-a-Lago. And we don't know who else he shared it with. Did he share it with the Saudis? Did he share it with Russia? Is he sharing it when Viktor Orban, after meeting with Vladimir Putin, shows up at Mar-a-Lago like he did last week? Is Trump sharing those? We know Trump is sharing them with like Australian billionaires, because the Australian billionaire said Trump told me about the nuclear submarine program as it relates to Australia after this Australian billionaire spent $1 million at Mar-a-Lago. We have audio tapes of Donald Trump talking about war plans with the ghostwriter of Mark Meadows' books. But Judge Cannon says, don't worry, it doesn't make a difference. I'm dismissing the case. Now, it's terrible that she's doing that, but at least the Band-Aid's been ripped off. Special counsel Jack Smith has already announced he's appealing to the 11th Circuit. I think the 11th Circuit is ready to overturn Judge Cannon. There's so much precedent here that the 11th Circuit's not going to find that Judge Cannon made the right ruling. And I think we're also going to see special counsel Jack Smith seek Judge Cannon's removal and cite all of her conduct. I think it'll be a detailed motion citing all of her behavior. But let's also finally be clear about the timing of what Judge Cannon did. She intentionally used paperless orders to delay the case for over a year, and then she timed it. This is, again, not extreme rhetoric. I'm reporting the facts. She then timed it so on the first day of the Republican National Convention, she would give Donald Trump a win that he could brag about at the Republican National Convention. That's why she did it today. That's not extreme rhetoric. That's simply what happened. You can go back and read all of her other minute orders where she would attack special counsel Jack Smith, attack the prosecutors, and do some of the most astonishingly baffling and unlawful things, placed FBI and law enforcement lives in jeopardy with prior rulings. But that is what she did. That is who she is. And when we think about people like Alina Habba and people like Christina Bobb and Rudy Giuliani and others like that, in a Trump administration, you're going to have Alina Habba Supreme Court Justice. You're going to have Alina Habba potentially Attorney General, a Marjorie Taylor Greene Secretary of State, a Marjorie Taylor Greene Commerce Secretary. People like that are going to have major positions over life and death matters for we the people. And that's not hyperbolic. That's not extreme rhetoric. What's extreme, for example, is Donald Trump picking JD Vance. What's extreme is the behavior of Judge Eileen Cannon. That is what's extreme. Again, there is some silver lining here, as I mentioned, which is Jack Smith's going to appeal to the 11th Circuit. He said he is. I think she gets overturned. And I think when Joe Biden wins re-election, this is now going to go in front of another judge. And it will be in front of a judge who respects law and order. And now that case will actually go to trial. She was never going to allow it to go to trial. So at least
honestly, this is like the best case scenario, honestly, which is weird to say when you get like the case dismissed and you say it's the best case scenario. But to me, this is the best case scenario because the entire time, the thing that I was concerned that Judge Cannon was planning on doing was bringing this case to a trial in some form, seating a jury in some form, and then dismissing the case once jeopardy is attached. And that would have been the worst case scenario because the case would never have been able to be tried. Or the second worst case scenario would have been what she's been doing this entire time, which is the process that Ben just described of her not actually making any real orders, but sticking to these paperless orders that cannot be overturned on any sort of appeal. So at least finally, Jack Smith has a case to make now to the 11th Circuit, and he could do so in a big way by asking them to get her off the case. So the silver lining is that of all the bad options that are out there, this is the best one that we could hope for at this point. And so I'll leave it at that.
I want to hear
Let me
your.
just ask you a quick question here, because I know we were talking about the timing of all of this, and I think you very astutely pointed out, well, it's the start of the RNC. So, you, in your opinion, you don't think this has anything to do? This didn't, what transpired over this past weekend emboldened Judge Cannon to then make this order today? You think it's more time to the RNC?
What emboldened her to make the order was the Supreme Court's absolute immunity ruling. And she cited Justice Clarence Thomas throughout her 93-page order. Her order was 93 pages. So she didn't write the 93 pages in the past 24 hours. She had that ready, but it was, when was she going to release it? And ultimately, when she got the Supreme Court ruling and she saw that Justice Clarence Thomas had her back, she's like, okay, not only had her back, was instructing her what to do, was giving her the marching orders. So Justice Clarence Thomas, who's been bribed by more than $4 million from MAGA billionaires who have paid for his lavish trips, including, by the way, trips to Russia. Then you had Judge Cannon take that, and Judge Cannon said, got it. Here's what I got to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I got the green light. Go. I think that's really what it was about. Brett, I want to talk about what's going on in the Republican National Convention. The chants, fight, 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 over and over again. That's their chant. I have a lot of people who try to watch it even just for a little bit. And the constant message I'm getting from people are, I can't watch this. This is like the worst cult I've ever seen. This is like, I'm getting so many messages like, this is the most bizarre cult. And it is. It's all the cultiest, Trumpiest things in the world. And as we talk a little bit in the next segment too about about the shooting that transpired, it's significant to note that President Biden immediately called the family of the individual who was attending, the Trump supporter who was there, who was shot and killed. President Biden reached out as a firefighter. President Biden reached out to that firefighter's wife. The wife refused to take the call from President Biden, saying that my husband's a Trump supporter and a MAGA, so I can never take a phone call from President Biden. Notably, Donald Trump did not call at all, at least as of this recording, didn't make a phone call, didn't send any condolences or anything like that. But you think about where the rhetoric was, where even when a president of the United States calls to send condolences, that it's so divided that if you're MAGA, you won't even pick up the phone call and accept the message from President Biden. But when they're saying things over and over and over again, like they have about President Biden, that's that's one of the results. Let's take our last quick break of the show, and then Brett, I want you to break down what's going down at the RNC.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our next sponsor, ZBiotics. If you're like me, you probably skipped a workout because of drinks the night before. Look, it happens, but if you're committed to your healthy routine, you need ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Recently, I was celebrating my anniversary, and I knew my wife and I were going to enjoy a lovely night of drinking at a local winery as instructed. I drank a bottle of ZBiotics before any alcohol, and I was amazed at how good I felt the next day. Give ZBiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/Meidas to get 15% off your first order when you use code Meidas at checkout. That's MEIDAS. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/Meidas and use the code Meidas, MEIDAS, at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode.
Sleep is the foundation of our mental and physical health. When you are sleeping well, you can perform at your best mentally and physically. Introducing Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed healthy hot cocoa for sleep. If you know me, you know that Dream has been an absolute game changer for my sleep. I drink Beam's Dream Powder each night in order to get my optimal sleep, and I have to say, I would not be recommending this if it didn't actually help me. And today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their science-backed healthy hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. Now available in delicious flavors like chocolate peanut butter, cinnamon cocoa, and sea salt caramel with only 15 calories and 0 grams of sugar. Other sleep aids could cause next day grogginess, but Dreams contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, melatonin, and nano CBD to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. The numbers don't lie. In a clinical study, 93% of participants reported Dream helped them get better sleep. Beam Dream is easy to add to your nighttime routine. Just mix Dream into hot water or milk, froth, and enjoy before bed. Find out why Forbes and New York Times are all talking about Beam and why it's trusted by the world's top athletes and business professionals. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, get up to 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Meidas and use code Meidas at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/MEIDAS and use code Meidas for up to 40% off.
Let's go. Shout out to our sponsors. Shout out to the pro-democracy sponsors. The links are in the description of the YouTube and both the audio. I had some Z-Biotics this weekend, y'all. I had I had maybe like a bottle of red, some red wine. I had my Z-Biotics before we drank, and felt great the next day. I was ready to take on the day. So I just want to put that out there. And then, so I want to just, before we toss it to Brett for Vance, I want to piggyback, Ben, on that last segment that you did, especially once you got towards like the unifying component, right? Because corporate media right now, they're just taking Trump's one truth about how, this is a moment of unity for the country. But I think it's important that we talk about like the definition of Trump's unity, right? Because Trump's definition of unity appears to be very different than I think how most people understand the word unity. Trump's idea of unity is everyone must obey and vote for me, and all the cases against me have to be dropped immediately. And January 6th, that was a hoax. And to say otherwise, that's divisive. By the way, I find it extremely telling that the first thing Trump did over the weekend when he got back to his feet was raise his hand and scream, "Fight, fight." Fight whom? That's unifying? But keep giving him the benefit of the doubt, corporate media. Keep taking him. He truthed it. He truthed something about unifying. That was a unifying message. So he truthed it. So that's what we're going to run with. But look at the actions. They don't match up. Right.
And he didn't truth it. I mean, that's bullshit right there, because I'll show you the Trump message that he posted. It was like the most ununifying message imaginable. And it goes to your point about exactly what Donald Trump is saying. I mean, if we look at this post, Donald Trump calls January 6th a hoax. He says that all of his cases should be dismissed. He calls all the prosecutions against him witch hunts. He calls the New York AG, he attacks the New York AG. He calls he defames E. Jean Carroll, his sexual assault victim, who a judge said that he raped. He lies about his phone call to try to overthrow the election. He says that the Biden Justice Department coordinated political hit jobs on him. He says that these are the things that he says that are unifying ideas. And even if you were to tune into the Republican convention, and like, why even do that? It's crazy. But you see like Ron Johnson up there, and he's already spreading all this transphobia. And he did this whole speech already about how Democrats are trying to destroy America and all this stuff. And then he was asked about it like shortly after, and his excuse was, "Oh, they loaded the wrong speech in the teleprompter. I meant to have a more unifying speech." All right, you're going to blame the teleprompter because they loaded the entire wrong speech in it. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene getting up there also just making her whole thing anti-LGBTQ people, just hateful rhetoric, and they just continue to ratchet up the temperature, and they continue to say anytime somebody on the other side of things tries to say basic facts about Donald Trump's plans, they try to gaslight you and they try to shut you up by using those terms of, oh, I thought it was unity. No, you don't get the benefit of the doubt here. If you are going to say these things, you have to be called out on these things. You are the one. You can't do a horrible action, then when somebody calls out that horrible action, go, whoa, 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 why are you attacking me? And that's how they weaponize their sort of MAGA victim complex. And it's quite frankly what they've always done.
Couldn't agree more with you, Brett. All right, Brett, tell us about the selection of JD Vance. And then if you can, Brett, tell us a little bit about what's going on in the RNC.
Yeah, sure. So JD Vance was selected by Donald Trump to be his vice president pick. It started becoming pretty apparent over the past few days. JD Vance is really, he pulls together like the worst aspects of Trumpism, I would say. He is the perfect hodgepodge of just all the nastiness of Trump, with the pro-Russia stuff, anti-Ukraine, denying January 6th, being against abortion, being against no-fault divorce, putting forth bills or supporting bills rather to protect that not supporting bills that protect IVF. He's somebody who supports a nationwide abortion ban. He's opposed exceptions for rape survivors. He once described rape as, quote, inconvenient, just a little inconvenience that a woman might have. They don't need an exception for it for these policies. I mean, he's really a horrible, horrible guy. And he started his career, he was a Silicon Valley guy, like Ben said, under Peter Thiel's tutelage, which is also probably one of the reasons he was chosen. If you had to ask me, why was he chosen, despite this entire history of talking crap about Donald Trump leading up to the 2016 election, I would say, one, it's because he bent the knee to Trump. Two, he's like his little puppy dog. He sucked up, and during one rally, Trump literally said to him, "You see JD Vance over there kissing my ass?" It's an actual thing that Donald Trump said while JD Vance was next to him on stage. I mean, how pathetic do you get? Also, he's friends with Don Jr. I think that probably factors in a lot, that he's friendly with Don Jr. And I think also, with JD Vance probably comes a lot of money and influence within Silicon Valley, because, as I said, he was a Peter Thiel guy. He's well connected to Elon Musk. And so those billionaire Silicon Valley funders who worked with JD Vance in the past and are very close with him, they now also have their own stooge who could potentially end up in the White House. So I think those factors are basically why he's there. Now, who else likes the fact that JD Vance was the pick? The creator of Project 2025, who said today that he had a big smile on his face that he could not control once he heard that JD Vance was the nomination. This was an exact quote from him. He was someone that privately we were rooting for. That's what the creator of Project 2025 said. And why? Because JD Vance is the perfect Project 2025 candidate. He embodies everything that Project 2025 stands for. He's open to a national abortion ban. Once JD Vance, he compared abortion to slavery. He makes these really outrageous, horrific comments. He said that parents should be forced to stay in violent marriages for the sake of their kids. He said, even if a woman is getting beat by her husband, that she should stay in that marriage for the sake of her family, and blamed it on the sexual revolution for women being out of their place and trying to get out of these horrifically abusive relationships. He read Dr. Seuss on the House floor. He's like one of those kind of guys who pulls all these various stunts. He's a January 6th denier in many ways. He said he doubted that Mike Pence on January 6th was ever even in any danger, and that there was any danger that day whatsoever. He said he doesn't really care much for Ukraine. I mean, this is the person that we're talking about. And even as of the recording of the show, I'm sure he'll take it down soon. I don't know, maybe not. But on JD Vance's own website, he has a whole section about ending abortion and touting the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Even if you just look over the past few days, you see comments from JD Vance that are just utterly disqualifying. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, blood not even dry, JD Vance took to Twitter and he wrote the following. He said, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. It was a Republican. It was a registered Republican. Biden had nothing to do with it. How irresponsible, how disqualifying is that? This is a guy who called Donald Trump, and I repeat, he wondered if Donald Trump was, quote, America's Hitler. America's Hitler. And he had the nerve to write that tweet. JD Vance is somebody, he ran this like an anti-drug charity, like the scam, which is very much like Trump. Here are some other comments JD Vance has made about Donald Trump. He said, quote, I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. Terrible candidate. You're an idiot if you voted for him. As I said, might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical asshole, called him cultural heroin, called him noxious, called him reprehensible. But that's what somebody who is just kind of pure ambition with no actual thoughts other than wanting to get power wants. And he is just, frankly, in my opinion, a vessel for these billionaires, these Silicon Valley billionaires. I mean, he was like a hedge fund guy. This guy is the epitome of the elites who is kind of cosplaying as a man of the working class. And if you read his book that he got famous on, there's so many passages throughout that book that he wrote that kind of rose him to prominence. Hillbilly Elegy, I believe it is called, where he just calls the working class people of this country lazy. He says that they're on welfare. He says they're just not as good as everybody else. Like, he makes a lot of comments that shows his pure disdain for working class people. And I'll just show you another couple examples of him being a chameleon. I know I kind of went through a lot. Here is the text where he wonders if Donald Trump is America's Hitler. He goes, I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging? And he liked a tweet a few years ago that called Trump a monster. Here was a tweet he had. It's a picture of Trump and O.J. Simpson. It says, here is an old picture of one of USA's most hated, villainous, douchey celebs. Also in this picture, O.J. Simpson. That individual who liked this tweet is JD Vance, Donald Trump's vice presidential pick for this election. And I think we also have to reflect a lot on, why does Donald Trump have to pick a new vice presidential pick? Why? Because he tried to get the last one killed, because the last one tried to do the bare minimum and just follow the Constitution. And what did the Republican Party do? What did Donald Trump do? They turned him into a villain for doing the bare minimum to actually follow the Constitution. If you want to ask yourself if Donald Trump is a threat to this country, just look at what him and his party did to Mike Pence as a result of him doing the bare minimum to actually follow the laws of our land. President Biden came out with a statement. I'll quote here from the Biden 2024 chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon. Donald Trump picked JD Vance as his running mate because Vance will do what Mike Pence wouldn't on January 6th. Bend over backwards to enable Trump and his extreme MAGA agenda, even if it means breaking the law and no matter the harm to the American people. As Trump's running mate, Vance will make it his mission to enact Trump's Project 2025 agenda at the expense of American families. This is someone who supports banning abortion nationwide while criticizing exemptions for rape and incest survivors, railed against the Affordable Care Act, including its protections for millions with pre-existing conditions, and has admitted he wouldn't have certified the free and fair election in 2020. Billionaires and corporations are literally rooting for JD Vance. They know he and Trump will cut their taxes and send prices skyrocketing for everyone else. Over the next 3.5 months, we will spend every single day making the case between these two starkly contrasting visions. Americans will choose between the ballot box this November. The Biden-Harris ticket is focused on uniting the country, creating opportunity for everyone and lowering costs, or Trump-Vance, whose harmful agenda will take away Americans' rights, hurt the middle class, make life more expensive, all while benefiting the ultra-rich. So that's JD Vance in a nutshell. And I think I'll also just add just the inexperience of JD Vance. You know, I'm sure Donald Trump is going to tout the fact that he is a very young candidate. I mean, Vance is 39 years old, super, super young. But with his youth also comes an incredible amount of inexperience. It's not like he's been a guy who's been in the Senate for a decade or 5 years or even 4 years or 3 years. He hasn't even been there for 2 years. He's not been in the government for more than 2 years. And this guy was put in a position where if something were to happen to Donald Trump, that this guy could be running the country. And I think that also needs to factor into people's decision making and the way they think about this person, because you want somebody who is prepared to step into the job, and somebody who just entered the government a year and a half ago and has not shown any sort of consistent ideology and actually changed their entire persona to become this MAGA JD. It's like his weird alter ego where he just kisses Trump's ass. I'm quoting Trump on that. That's like, how do you even know what you're getting with this individual? But anyway, when I was looking at, Donald Trump's short list at the end, we kind of were all discussing it internally, and it kind of became clear that Vance was going to probably be the pick at that point. But I was like, if he picks Vance, it's the dumbest decision out of all of them. It is like, honestly, the stupidest decision out of all of them, because he's the least palatable of everybody on Donald Trump's short list. Like, he could have picked a unity candidate, right? He could have picked the like quote unquote, but he could have picked somebody who has a bit more appeal to voters. But he actually ended up picking somebody who is like the single most repulsive of all of his options. So I guess that's a silver lining of the Donald Trump pick here, that he picked somebody so repulsive and with such a record of making such despicable, horrific statements and a record of doing such horrible things, stripping away the rights of people. Now Biden and Harris have that to run off of as well. And I think that contrast is going to be made incredibly clear over the next few months.
From a purely strategic perspective, if you wanted to win a race, it is the single worst pick, JD Vance, that you could put on your ticket. From a I need and will be able to control someone and manipulate them and have them do whatever I do perspective, then it starts to make a lot more sense why Trump went that way. I think when you were looking at the other candidates who had their names in the ring, a Rubio, a Burgum, whoever, Youngkin towards the end, I think he, as in Trump, probably got scared that those guys would probably act in his mind. They might pull a Mike Pence on him and follow the Constitution and do what every vice president has done since the country started. But somebody like a Vance, that sort of really is too the base of MAGA, or at least who Trump really tries to appeal to, which is like these younger white guys who feel oppressed for being younger white guys. And that is JD Vance in a nutshell, as someone looking out.
A, he sucked up to Trump and changed his entire beliefs for Trump and does whatever Trump says. B, he's very close friends with Don Jr. And C, he's very well connected to big money in Silicon Valley, who are going to pour millions, if not billions of dollars into Donald Trump's campaign. Yep. Those are the three reasons why Donald Trump landed on JD Vance. And you'll notice none of those three answers were because he appeals to voters or helps win a swing state or any other strategic reasons. He picked him for those other reasons.
Here's moments ago, I subscribed to Trump's listserv, so y'all don't have to. Here was the email that was sent from the JD Vance account to all the people on Trump's listserv. Here's what I told, they call him President Trump, he's the former president. Official memo from JD Vance. When Trump asked me to be his vice presidential nominee, this is what I told him. As your vice president, I will faithfully serve by your side, and you make our country great again. It's like a typo. And you make our country great again. Nothing about faithfully serving to protect and defend our Constitution. I will serve by your side, and you make our country great again. And I think that, says it all. And I think what's most important to always remember over these past few weeks too, we've all really been challenged. And I think the level of resiliency within the pro-democracy community, especially in calling out the behavior of corporate media, and really recognizing their plans, their strategy, their behavior. I think that's what makes this different, though, than 2016 when they were doing this the first time with kind of Hillary Clinton. I think that we've all adapted to see their failures coming, and perhaps we couldn't necessarily use the language to quite figure out what it was that they were doing. But I think they've definitely revealed themselves as not focused on facts and instead really focused on access, and frankly, whatever they perceive as making them a lot of money in the short term, even if that means destroying our democracy. And, we, the people, we don't see things that way. We recognize these threats to our country, to our families, to our loved ones, to our neighbors, to our communities, to our towns, neighborhoods, cities, country, and to the world. And we're not going to allow this oligarchical class, this corporate media tycoons, these people who would sell our country out for tax cuts. We're not going to let that happen. And we're going to get out the word, and we're going to support and defend our democracy each and every day. We are going to be the change that we want and the change that we're looking for. And so that's you, the Meidas Mighty. So share this network, share this channel with others. Let people know as they've stopped and they've tuned off or turned off corporate media that this is the place for them, for Democrats, for mainstream Republicans, for liberals, for progressives, for independents, for mainstream conservatives, for people who don't even like politics or care about labels at all, who just want to talk about normalcy and just want to hear the facts and have normal conversations without screaming and yelling and the theatrics and the drama. We just want to have serious, intelligent, thoughtful conversations about these issues and be both descriptive and prescriptive. So we do here at the MeidasTouch Network. Thank you all for watching. Hit subscribe. Let's get to that 3 million subscriber range. We're going to do our after show at patreon.com/MeidasTouch right now. We're not funded by outside investors. So if you want to help grow this platform, go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, as you hear my dogs asking you to do as well. We will do an after show right now. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a good one. Jordy, take it up.
Shout out to the Meidas Mighty!
The Meidas Mighty standing strong against the fascists. We sing our song. We will get it right whenever.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. The film Against All Enemies, which I co-produced with Ben Meiselas and this network, has won awards around the world for its up-close portrayal of America's insurrectionist movement. It premieres in the U.S. on March 29th on Amazon and Apple TV. Go to againstalllenemiesfilm.com or click the link below. But don't just watch Against All Enemies. Tell your friends about it. It's one more way to hold accountable those who threaten our democracy. Thanks, Meidas Mighty. Let's use our power well.